Boise State enters a new era under Spencer Danielson, and it's not really surprising. Last year was such a weird year for Boise State, and a coaching change was made, and then they found themselves in the Mountain West Championship game, which was surprising. But now you enter a new era, and Spencer Danielson, I think that this program, this roster really likes him. They believe in him, and it's going to be interesting to see what he can do for a program that is looking to get back to the top of the Mountain West. Today, we take a deep dive into the Boise State Broncos to see what we should expect from this team in 2024. Before we do that, though, make sure you subscribe to the channel, like the video, share the video. It goes a long way in helping the channel grow. This has been such a fun series to do. Boise State is one of those teams that's really fun to talk about, and it's really exciting that I can do a deep dive, but it's not possible without all of you. You are the reason this is happening. You are the reason why the channel is growing, and I can't thank all of you enough. But without further ado, let's dive into Boise State. Spencer Danielson takes over, like we said, and he gets to hire his coaching staff. He gets first crack at his ability to let certain guys call plays, and he brings in Dirk Cutter from the NFL level. He has plenty of experience, and that's going to be interesting. We'll talk about that more in a little bit because they have interesting players, and how they fit into that offense will be intriguing. You also bring in Eric Shenander. Eric is one of those guys that when you talk about defensive coordinators, his name isn't coming up as much because of his time at Nebraska, just didn't ultimately work out. But when you look at what he's done at the group of five level, specifically that 2017 UCF run, the biggest reason, I shouldn't say the biggest reason, UCF's offense in 2017 was one of the best in college football. The biggest reason why they were so successful, though, is because Shenander's defense was so opportunistic. This wasn't a group that was dominant by any means. They did not shut people down on a consistent basis, but they found ways to create turnovers. And if you're a Boise State fan, I would put a lot of stock into his ability to get this group eventually. Maybe not this year, maybe he does this year, but eventually he's going to get that group to buy into we want to create turnovers. We are maybe not going to stop everybody, but if we can get the football back, that's just as good as keeping teams off of the board and shutting teams down because we're going to get this offense the ball back and we're going to find ways to help this team win. And again, this is a group that needs to find ways to be better defensively, and creating turnovers is going to help your team build plenty of momentum. When you look at the transfer portal, this team did not bring in a ton of talent. They lost quite a bit, but they did not bring in many pieces. And they brought in some quality pieces, but that also speaks to, I think that this staff really likes what they have on the roster. Now you lose guys like Eric McAllister, Taylor Green are gone. So you lost a couple of players that are going to hurt, but you also bring in a talent like Malachi Nelson. You bring in Cam Camper. So you have players coming in that should replace those departing players, and you should feel pretty good about where this team will go if you're in the right spot. You also get a guy like Jeremiah Irby from Cal at the cornerback position. So they didn't really, I don't want to say lose their minds over guys leaving, but they also didn't overreact to those guys leaving either. They didn't find ways, actually, they did find ways to find quality pieces. They're not going to hammer the transfer portal. They didn't this year, but they feel pretty good about where this program's at in terms of recruiting. They think they have the right guys in place. And when you look at both offense and defense, it's kind of easy to see why. And we'll dive into that offense here because everyone's excited about Malachi Nelson's arrival. They think that he is exactly what this team needs. And when you look at last year, the offense had a lot going for them, but there was also some things that were just like you wanted to bang your head against the wall. Quarterback position was a big reason why. Now, when things are going well for Taylor Green was one of the best quarterbacks talent wise in college football. The problem was that the consistency just wasn't there. You saw times where Taylor Green made throws where you're like, that kid could probably play in the NFL. And then you saw times where you're like, what are you looking at? What could you have possibly seen on that play that made you think, I got to do this? Now he's gone. He's off to Arkansas, and there's a reason why Arkansas fans and that coaching staff really likes him. The talent is there. I'm not saying Taylor Green is not a good quarterback. There is plenty of talent to tap into with Taylor Green. He has plenty of ability. It's just it wasn't going to work at Boise State. And when the coaching change ultimately happened, the transfer didn't really surprise me. Now you bring in a talent like Malachi Nelson. Now, this was surprising. Boise State getting a transfer like Malachi Nelson, someone who, when he came to USC, so many people were excited about his future with the Trojans. They thought he was the future of that program. And when you watch his film from high school, it's easy to see why. The ball just comes off his hand a little bit different than other quarterbacks. And then he chooses Boise State of all schools. Honestly, when he hit the transfer portal, I was shocked that he was going to transfer. I thought that he was going to transfer somewhere to like a Power Five program when he did. But then the fact that he also chooses Boise State was even more surprising. That being said, there's still a lot to prove with this game. He is still someone who does not have any experience. He is someone that has to prove that he can be a starting quarterback. And when you look at what Boise State has returning, I don't think you have to worry too much about it. You don't have to, again, he does not have to be the, I don't think he has to be hero because of what he has next to him and also what he has coming back at wide receiver, at tight end. So he is someone that can take things slowly. He can get acclimated to his new offense, his new team. And when you have a player like Ashton Jeanty next to you, you don't really need to do too much. When you have Ashton Jeanty in your offense, we talk about certain players and you'd say, like, oh, he's a cheat code or this is like video game numbers. Ashton Jeanty is one of those guys in real life that you're like, hey, we're just going to give you the ball and you just figure it out. And he usually does. He's explosive is like almost a too mild way to describe him. He is so good. Whether that's catching the football, running the football, he is a touchdown waiting to happen. And there's a reason why he had over 1,300 yards rushing and 14 touchdowns. He is an All American type talent. He is a future NFL back. He is exactly what Boise State needs. And then, so maybe just as surprising as getting Malachi Nelson was the fact that Ashton Jeanty did not transfer. Do you know how many teams would take Ashton Jeanty in a heartbeat? It's probably most teams in college football. It does not matter who you are. You probably do not have a running back like Ashton Jeanty on your roster. Now, some teams have running backs that are good, but you do not have an Ashton Jeanty. You can make an argument that Ashton Jeanty is the best running back in college football, and I would probably support you. He is that good. So the fact that Boise State kept him is a little bit surprising. I'm not saying that every kid is going to transfer, but I feel like this staff, almost breathed a sigh of relief when the transfer portal closed for the last time this year. The fact that Jeanty did not go in there, he did not go anywhere, and now he is back says a lot about what he thinks about this program and his belief in Spencer Danielson. So those are two guys that are huge to get and retain. And you're going to see some really exciting things from those two in 2024. In terms of depth, the running back position, when Jeanty needs a break, whenever that might actually be, John Brace Newbar is back, 335 yards and 2 touchdowns. You also have Sire Gaines, a freshman who should play a prominent role as well. The staff really likes him. The quarterback position, Maddox Matson comes back. He was one of those players that went back and forth with Taylor Green and again, had some inconsistencies, threw 11 touchdowns, had 9 picks. So he is back to back up Malachi Nelson. And again, if Nelson can't figure it out, Matson is ready and willing to take over as the starting quarterback. Max Cutforth could be in that conversation. The redshirt freshman is looking for his chance as well. So the quarterback position kind of has some unknowns right now. You're not really super confident in it, but you also are excited about what Malachi Nelson could bring to the table for this offense. And the passing attack needs to get better. They finished 67th last year, and you lose quite a bit of talent and you lose some veteran players. That being said, you have some explosive options coming back. Latrell Caples will be the leader of that group, missed all of last year, but has plenty of experience and plenty of talent to be a solid player for this passing attack. And then the next two guys. When you look at if it's Prince Strachan or Prince Strachan, not really sure how to say his last name, 274 yards and 2 touchdowns. Doesn't matter how you say his name. This is a dude who has big playability. Now, that those numbers don't necessarily say anything, but this is a kid who averaged nearly 23 yards per catch. Also comes in at 6'5", 203. So that's a big body that you're going to find downfield quite a bit. Then you look at Austin Bolt. You think, oh, well, yeah, one guy that averaged nearly 23 yards per catch, and maybe that doesn't have the most catches, but that's really, really good. You probably don't have anybody that's better than that. Nope. Austin Bolton there averaged 30 yards per catch. Granted, small sample size for both these guys, but that also speaks to their explosive ability. It's not like they had one or two catches. They had double digit catches. So they have received plenty of passes in the air. They are capable of making explosive plays. We have seen that. You just have to find ways to do that consistently. Now, Caples will get them in line in terms of how to do it consistently. So that's really good to have back. And those are two guys that should explode if they're able to translate that from a smaller sample size into a larger one. They also brought in some talent from the transfer portal. Cam Camper comes in from Indiana, a very underrated transfer addition. I think that a lot of people liked Cam Camper coming into the 2023 season, and now kind of gets forgotten because of the struggles at Indiana, but he is someone that could play a large role for this offense as well. He is a very capable player, someone who knows how to get open. So he'll be fun to watch. Chris Marshall is someone who starts at Texas A&M, goes to Ole Miss. Things just don't work out, and whether I don't know what's going on. I don't have all the details on Chris Marshall and what is going on with his life, but I know there's been some off-field stuff that has affected his ability to compete on the field. He is coming to Boise State on kind of like that last chance, if you will. And Spencer Danielson has had nothing but good things to say about him. He is putting in the work both on and off the field, and he is going to be a contributing factor to this passing attack. It's just a matter of what capacity. And if he continues to be on this path, and it's a good path right now, seems like he's really figured it out, found his role, and found what he needs to do to be successful as a football player and as a person. There's a reason why teams wanted him coming out of high school. And when I see teams, I mean so many people wanted him. So the fact that he's coming to Boise State and he is bringing that talent to Boise State, if he figures it out, this passing attack is going to be a nightmare to stop, and Boise State is going to quickly overtake the Mountain West. Chase Penny is an interesting player as well. 5 catches, 48 yards. We'll see if he can get into that rotation. It's going to be tough with this competition. And then there's the tight end position. Matt Lauder comes back after a 157 yard season, also had 3 touchdowns, 6'3", 240 pounds. I think the tight end position has been very underrated for Boise State. I'd like to see it more involved in the passing attack, and I think that they will. Matt Wagner is a redshirt freshman that could play a role as well. Luke Voorhees is a redshirt junior that's played a little bit, mostly on special teams. So they have some guys coming back. I just need to see it, I think, before I believe that the tight end position is going to play a more prominent role, but they have options for sure. So the passing attack, you feel pretty good if you're Boise State. You feel like you have the right pieces in place, and it's going to be fun to watch what this offense can do if they're able to not only keep the run going, but also if they're able to take a step forward in the passing attack. The offensive line plays a big role in that as well, and this is a group that returns quite a bit of experience as well as bringing in certain talent to help this group tremendously. And when you look at what the offensive line did last year. This is a group that right away, I think people had doubts about this group. They had some inconsistencies, and I think that there were times where this group did not play very well. And you've had some veteran pieces come and go in the last few years, and now it feels like they've kind of steadied everything. They have made things right, and this will be a really fun group to watch. Cage Casey comes back. He's an all-conference type talent. Ben Dooley has been doing this for a while, also another all-conference type player. Mason Rudolph has 21 games of experience, kind of a more recent reliable player for this offense. Roger Carrion is going to play a more prominent role this year. And then you look at Hall Schmidt, someone who doesn't have a ton of experience, but someone who, again, is going to take on more of a larger role in this offense this year. And you have good size. The shortest guy is going to be Mason Rudolph at 6'4". He's also the smallest weight wise at 300 pounds. So size is not really a question for this offensive line. This is a group that should be very fun to watch and has good combination of veterans to new faces. So I think that that's going to be a good formula for Boise State to win football games. Behind them is where things are interesting because you have a redshirt freshman in Kyle Cox that will be behind Cage Casey. You have Jake and Jason Steele, who have combined 15 games played. Jake comes in from San Jose State. Jason is returning, will be behind Mason Rudolph. He had some experience. So he is definitely going to be an interesting player to watch, especially at the center position. You also have Dalton Montoyer coming in, a junior college All-American at tackle. Maybe if Schmidt isn't able to get the job done, you see him. You could also see him in the rotation if they rotate guys or if someone goes down with an injury. So the offensive line doesn't have a ton of concerns in terms of ability. It's just gonna be a matter of one, health, and then are you able to raise your ceiling to another level? That's probably been the biggest question with Boise State's offensive line. What is going to be the ceiling? Because the skill position talent has exactly what you need to be successful, but can you open things up for this group? Can you open things up for the skill positions? The offensive line will be very fun to watch. I think they have plenty of talent and the ability to do it. It's just a matter of, again, putting that all together. And then when you flip to the defense side of the ball, the offensive line can help the defensive line tremendously. That being said, there are plenty of all conference type players on Boise State's defensive line. Ahmed Hassanein is going to be the guy that everybody knows. 53 tackles, 16 and a half tackles for loss last year. This is a group that has really good size. You go 6'3, 272, 6'1, 306, 6'2, 295, and 6'3, 255 on that defensive line. Size is not a problem. So handling life in the trenches shouldn't be an issue. But this was a group that they finished 40th against the run. So that tells me that the defensive line is doing its part, but they also finished 110th. So you need to find ways to get to the quarterback better. You also need your secondary to step up. And when we talk about the secondary, you're going to see there's some pieces that stepped up and took over as the season progressed. And that should be helpful to be more consistent for the entire year in 2024. Now, Haas9 is going to be the guy that everybody knows, which means that teams are going to send help his way. That opens things up for a guy like Jaden Virgin Morgan to step up in a big way. Plays the stud position for Boise State. Someone who needs to get to the quarterback needs to find ways to be disruptive, and he's going to get plenty of favorable matchups because teams need to send help towards Haas9's way. You need to find ways to win those battles. If not, a guy like Gabe Hunter could step up. Tavion Woodard, who comes in from Ball State, he could be a more prominent player because of maybe inconsistencies or injuries. So if someone's not able to do it, they have options behind them. Yeah, interior is where things are going to be interesting because you have Braxton Felly coming back, someone who I think, had a little bit of a down year last year, but also has the ability to be on Hassanine's level and the ability to be disruptive. Herbert Gums is back after a 21 tackle season, one tackle for loss. You also have Sheldon Newton, 22 tackles, 4.5 tackles for loss. Michael Callahan had 19 tackles, 2.5 tackles for loss, one sack. So experience is not really a question for this group. It's just going to be how do you raise that ceiling? Because it feels like this group has a pretty solid floor. It's just a matter of can you get better? Can you be more disruptive? And can you make life way easier for the guys behind you? That being said, the linebacker position is actually going to be a strength for Boise State this year. And I think it was last year. It's going to be once again Andrew Simpson's the name that I think most people know. 66 tackles, 16 tackles for loss, good athleticism, has the ability to be disruptive, knows how to find the ball carrier. He is someone that's going to be fun to watch, someone who's going to have a major impact on this defense. Marco Notrani is going to play a role as well. 53 tackles, 4.5 tackles for loss. Again, with everyone focusing on two players. You have Hassanine who's going to do it on the defensive line. Simpson is going to do it at linebacker. Everyone is going to have them circled on the scouting report. They're going to be like, hey, this guy, we need to take him away this way. We need to do these certain things. So other guys are going to get chances to step up and play more prominent roles. Some guys that I'm excited to see at the linebacker position. Chase Martin could take on a bigger role this year, had 14 tackles last year. Jake Rip, 12 tackles last year. You also have very interesting players behind them. So it's the depth is going to be good for this linebacker group. I think that Udoka Eziani comes in from Butler Community College. He could play a bigger role in this defense at linebacker as well. Gavin Hambrick could play a role as well. So you linebacker to me feels like it's a solid group. The defensive line feels like it's a solid group. But you have to find ways to take that step. And I talked about it before. Eric Commander has plenty of talent to utilize. He just needs to figure out how he can get this group to either improve in terms of stopping teams, but also how do you create turnovers? And part of that is going to start with the front group, but also the secondary. Now, the secondary, I think, was trying to figure things out early in the season last year, and it just wasn't going well. It also didn't help that you played some tougher competition early in the season, so that probably affected things as well. That being said, I think they figured out their combinations and they brought in a talent like Jeremiah Irby that's going to help tremendously. And that being said, some of those pieces that started the year as the starters are also back. So they got experience. Say Oladipo is going to play that nickelback position. He is someone that this coaching staff and Shenander should be able to utilize. When you go back and look at what UCF did in 2017, that nickel position was such a key position for that group. So Oladipo probably plays a more important role than people realize. Next to Irby, you have Amari McCoy, who had 3 interceptions last year, a guy who wasn't expected to probably have that kind of production, but exceeded expectations, and now he's back to do it again. Alexander Tubner and Ty Benefield are back at safety. So you have two guys that you feel pretty good about in terms of production, in terms of reliability. Behind them, though, this is where I think Boise State feels pretty good because, again, we talked about how you need to raise the ceiling because the floor feels pretty good. Having guys like Zion Washington, Rodney Robinson, and Markel Reed at their respective positions back says a lot about what kind of depth you have. Now, a couple of those guys were supposed to be starters, and things just didn't work out for various reasons. But they're back and they're going to push the starters still. They are not going to be satisfied with being the backups, and that's going to make this group better as a whole. So, yes, you had your struggles last year, and yes, there was some inconsistencies, but Spencer Danielson found ways to steady the ship and find ways to be successful. And part of that was getting the right players in the right roles. Some of these players were in backup roles last year, start the year. That changed as the season progressed, and they found ways to basically say, hey, this isn't working for us. We need to find ways to be better. And how do we do that? Well, one way is to put the right guys on the field. And that's what they did. And that's what makes this secondary so exciting. And it also is exciting that those certain players didn't go to the transfer portal. They decided, hey, I'm ready to prove that I can bounce back from last year. I can be better than I was last year. And that's only going to make this group better as the whole. And when you look at what this defense can do as a whole, you're looking at a group that should be much better than it was last year. And if they find ways to create turnovers, that makes things really exciting. And they're going to need it because this schedule doesn't really do them a ton of favors in terms of who they have to face. Because when you talk about the Mountain West, we know that we're talking about Washington State and Oregon State joining that conference in a way. And Boise State gets both of them, which kind of sucks, honestly, but it is what it is at this point. To me, the ceiling is 9-3. When things are going well, even if you're able to surprise some people with how deep this conference is, it's going to be tough to win 10 football games. So 10, if you want to say they're going to go 10-2, great. If not, well, whatever. Over unders 8.5 wins. I think that the ceiling is 9-3. You go at Georgia Southern. That's an underrated sleeper game. Georgia Southern could be very good this year. At Oregon's going to be a loss. I know there's going to be some fans that think that Boise State can beat Oregon. I'm telling you right now, that is not going to happen. That is just not, that's a loss for sure. And I want to be the guy that's like, yes, Boise State is going to win. Boise State is going to stone Oregon in Autzen Stadium. That is just not going to happen. If you remember, they went to Washington last year. And how did that go? Oregon is supposed to be a playoff team this year. Washington was a playoff team last year. And it was very obvious that they were a playoff team last year when they just destroyed Boise State. So you can keep it close. I'm sure that they'll pull out some tricks up their sleeve, but Oregon's just too good. So I don't really want to hear about how Oregon is in trouble. That's just not how it's going to work. And that just is what it is. Portland State's going to be a win. The Washington's so what? Here's the thing: Washington State and Oregon State. I think Boise State can win both of those games. It's just going to be very tough. Washington State is going to play with a chip on their shoulder, as is Oregon State. Washington State season didn't go how they wanted it last year. Oregon State's with the new coaching staff, so they're going to be playing with plenty of focus and plenty of reasons to be successful. Washington State at the beginning of the year, I think that Boise State could clip them there. I think that early in the year is where you want to get them. But it's also going to be a tough game. Utah State at home suddenly looks a little bit easier. But again, Utah State is an underrated team that could surprise some people. Traveling to Hawaii, Hawaii is another sleeper team in the Mountain West. They could be very good this year. UNLV is going to be very good. We'll see what those teams look like at this point in the season. San Diego State at home. San Diego State's going to look very different under Sean Lewis. So keep an eye on that. But again, Boise State is the better team there. But San Diego State could surprise some people. Nevada should be a win. I don't really have any concerns about that game there. At San Jose State, feels like the Spartans are going to have a down year, but again, I wouldn't count that team out, nor would I count a trip to Wyoming out either. So again, it depends on what Boise State, how they're playing right now, because if they are putting together some wins, those two games don't really look as concerning. And then the Oregon State game is definitely a winnable game. But again, I think that when you have Georgia Southern, Oregon, Washington State, Hawaii, UNLV, Wyoming, and Oregon State, I think that if you're able to come away with just 3 losses in those, you're feeling pretty good about your season. It's just tough for me to find anything less than that. But it's still a successful year. 9-3 is still very good. I maybe if you want to say 10-2, that's great. Again, this is a team that wants to get into the college football playoff. 10-2 might do that, even if teams like Liberty go undefeated, even if Memphis goes 10-2. Just going to come down to what are your wins look like. If you beat certain teams that look better, and if you keep things close with Oregon, you have a chance to make the college football playoff. And that's probably what Boise State wants to do this year. And now that they have everything in place, it's easy to see why they expect to be there, and they could really surprise some people this year as long as they can get certain pieces in place. And if Malachi Nelson truly is the quarterback that he was meant to be at USC and he's doing it for Boise State, then the Broncos are set for the next couple of years.